Hey guys, Ranger here, and welcome back to another video. And right now it is the 14th of October, and so to celebrate this being the month that Fallout is set in, or rather, this being the month that Fallout supposedly started, October 23rd, 2077, and since it is actually fall, I thought in celebration of Fallout, and of course Fallout Equestria, I would share with you guys the story of how I got involved with the Fallout franchise. Now, this is an interesting story, at least for me anyway, because this is not your typical run-of-the-mill story. This is not your typical story. Sit back and hopefully enjoy. Now, the story... Now, I was not actually into the Fallout franchise several years ago. I wasn't. I did not get involved with the Fallout franchise until probably about 3 or 4 years ago. About 3 years ago. Officially. What started was probably back around 2010, maybe 2011, maybe. I'd say probably around... Actually, I'd say maybe around 2008, 2009. It was whenever Fallout 3 was out, but Fallout New Vegas had not come out yet. And I remember watching a cousin play Fallout 3. And we were at my grandmother's, and we were sitting in the dining room. And I remember playing on a small, bulky TV, like the 13-inch screen TV, and I remember he decided to start a new file, and he started a new game and got to the character creation screen, and I had never really, at this point, keep in mind this was back before I became a brony. This was back before 2011. So this has been longer than 7 years ago. So I remember he started the character creation, and at the time I didn't have the patience to go through the character creation. I just wanted him to pick whatever the freak ever he wanted and get on with the game. And I remember he advanced the game, picked his character, and then started. And at the time, I had no idea about the Fallout franchise. Had no idea about the game, about the franchise, the lore, anything. All I knew was Fallout. And it was supposedly a post-apocalyptic based setting. And I remember at the time it looked strange to me. Probably because of just everything was supposed to be decimated and desolate. And I remember he started the game, and he got to his 10th birthday and got the Pip-Boy, and then I remember him getting to the GOAT test segment, and I don't remember him playing any more of that. He did not play any more of that. I do remember him picking a few different moments where he would take his leveled character to the top of Tenpenny Tower. He would take a fat man, launch a nuke, and then jump off, and then try to see what happens after, like, below, watching as his body would ragdoll, or he would he would jump off and then fire a fat man as he was falling, and watch as his body, every limb would blow off. And so I remember watching him kill himself several times doing that, and that was my introduction to the Fallout franchise. I did not have any other experience with the Fallout franchise until after I became a brony. And I solely have to say, I completely owe my involvement with the Fallout franchise. I totally owe a major thank you to KCAT for creating Fallout Equestria, for creating the whole sub-fandom that is the Fallout Equestria fandom. And so I owe KCAT and Somber as well for Fallout Equestria Project Horizons. I owe and so many artists for doing such amazing art. And I remember my next experience with Fallout was after MLP had started, and it was after I became a brony. It was after 2011. I had not had any other experience with Fallout at this point. Let's see, it was probably around 2013, 2014. I guess whenever this happened. I remember I was on Derpy Baru, and I was browsing through OC art, and I stumbled across a picture. I don't remember what it was, but I remember stumbling across a beautiful piece of art that showed a character in what looked like a desolate wasteland. It was like a ravaged landscape. And curious, I clicked on the image and read the tags, and it said Fallout Equestria. And I thought, okay, that's cool. People have been making fan art based off of Fallout, and they've been blending it with MLP. That's cool. That was what I thought. Well, I started viewing, at that point, that I knew there was a tag for Fallout Equestria. So I started viewing art. I clicked onto the tag, and I started viewing artwork. Well, before long, it didn't take me long at all, I was introduced to the characters of Little Pip, Homage, Velvet Remedy, Calamity, Steel Hooves, Blackjack. I was introduced to these characters. And then reading through the comments, I saw people making mentions about a fanfic. And I'm like, oh, so there's a fanfic of this. So I did a quick search and found a link to it from Equestria Daily and also on FanFiction. And I hadn't read the story at the time. I did not read the story at the time. But I bookmarked it so I could go back and check it out later. But I kept viewing artwork of Fallout Equestria. I literally added Little Pip and Blackjack to my watch tags on Derpy Baru. So anytime any new art of those characters were published, it would be alerted to me. And I would frequently begin browsing through the art of the characters. And by browsing, and without having read the story of Fallout Equestria, I was able to piece a good portion of the story together simply by viewing fan art. And the more fan art that I viewed, the more I wanted to learn about the fanfic. The more I became invested with the Fallout Equestria fandom, the more I found myself loving it. There was such an interesting dynamic, and this is my own personal interpretation of it. It's MLP, yes, but that's what makes it, for me, so interesting. Whenever I look at the Fallout Equestria world, I see characters that have suffered. I see characters that have suffered for greed. They are, like characters such as Little Pip, Blackjack, they are victims of their ancestors' greed, of their control, of what they tried to do. And it's such a beautiful, haunting, it's such a hauntingly beautiful and beautifully haunting story. And viewing different fan art and piecing different segments together in the story, Tin Pony Tower, Homage, Red Eye, Fluttershy, the Pink Cloud, what happened at Canterlot, just piecing together all of this through fan art without having even read the story. And I found myself wanting more and more. It became pretty much like a drug to me. I wanted more. And at the time I was playing Skyrim. I still am. Of course, Skyrim is not a game that I can put down. I'm addicted to it. But I had become pretty much spoiled by the concept of such a beautiful open world like Skyrim. And so I wanted more games like that. And pretty much every time that I would Google games like Skyrim, Fallout was always the game that was always at the top of the list. But I did some research, and I knew that Fallout had the weapons and armor degradation system. Skyrim did not. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to get the games because I'm not going to be able to adjust to that system. So I kept putting it off. But the more that I viewed fan art, and the few fan fictions that I read about Fallout Equestria, the more that I read into with the lore of Fallout Equestria, the more I found myself wanting to experience that. And finally, I think it was back in it was 2016 or it was 2015 or 2016. I was playing Skyrim and I kept thinking about Fallout Equestria. And actually, what really pushed me over the edge was whenever I watched the Leaving the Stable SFM animation by Argo Daemon. Whenever I watched the Fallout Equestria Leaving the Stable SFM, the beautiful animation, that is pretty much what did it for me. Seeing the way that the stable was animated, seeing the way that the characters were modeled and just seeing it, and then hearing the clips from the radio play, listening to the radio play, and hearing that, I became a lot more invested. Upon seeing those animations, upon seeing those SFM animations, and then listening to the radio play, I found myself really wanting to experience Fallout and experience what gave the inspiration to start the Fallout Equestria sub-fandom. And so I remember I decided I was just going to do it. And having no knowledge of Fallout whatsoever, I embarrassingly made a bit of an oath out of myself. I went to GameStop and I asked them, again, I remember that a cousin of mine had played Fallout, but I didn't know which one. I didn't know how many that there were. I thought that was the first one. And I remember I went to GameStop and I asked the guy there, what was the last Fallout game to come out at the time? And he said Fallout New Vegas. I said, okay, I'll take that. Well, they actually had the Ultimate Edition, which had all of the DLC already on it, so I got that. And brought it home, started creating my character, and then I remembered. I knew how that Fallout New Vegas started. I knew that you got shot by Benny. I knew that because a few different lists that I had watched on a few different video lists that I had watched on YouTube about video games. I think insert I can't remember how many numbers, but games where you died at the beginning or something like that. Along with a few others along with a few other lists. I remembered watching those and that you got shot by Benny at the beginning, and also knew that there was a glitch where I think it was Doc Hoff, where the doctor, where his head would rotate around, and he would kind of hover still in the seating position across the room. And I was hoping that my game would do that. Unfortunately, it did not. It was patched, but I still was hoping that it would. But I remember I knew that I was going to get killed, but I didn't know what would happen after the doctor would heal me. So I picked my perks. I did not go with the Wild Wasteland because I didn't know what the freak it was at first. It doesn't give you a very good description of what to expect, so I didn't go with it. It said for more humorous. It pretty much said if you want your game to be more humorous. I thought it meant it adds more comical dialogue, and so I wanted a more serious experience, so I didn't choose Wild Wasteland. But I remember the moment that I stepped outside, I remember seeing the Mojave before me. There was the saloon and the general store here on the left. There was this old, like a 53 Chevy 3100 pickup sitting below, and just seeing New Vegas out in the distance. And I remember as soon as I stepped down onto the road, I thought, this is Fallout. And I remember looking around and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in Fallout. And I remember I turned right and walked down towards Victor's shack, and I found the old schoolhouse. And I remember walking in to check it out. That was the first place I explored. And I remember walking in, and I ran into some radroaches. And I had a pistol on me, the 9mm, but I didn't want to use my ammo. I wanted to conserve it, so I started punching the radroaches. And I said I would conserve ammo until I could get more ammo, or get better guns. And so I remember I just kind of continued through the game, and my first experience that really brought me back to Fallout Equestria was whenever I found my first vault. And I keep thinking it was Vault 34. I keep thinking it was Vault 34. It was one of the vaults on the western side of the map towards Jacobstown. On the side of Jacobstown. And I keep thinking it was Vault 34. It might not have been, but I remember going into it, and I don't think it was Vault 34, because Vault 30... I keep thinking it was, but it might not have been. But I remember stumbling across the vault, and immediately, boom. I remember I found the vault, and I remember I kind of just held my breath, because I thought back to the leaving the stable animation. And I remember opening the door and found this corridor, this hallway. And I got to the vault door, and immediately I had flashbacks to whenever Little Pip departed, whenever she left the stable, and there were skeletons lying outside. And I'm just having flashbacks to that in my head. And then I open the vault, I get inside, and it brings back the leaving the stable animation. And I found the control panel, and I activated it. And you start hearing the alarm going off, you start hearing the alarm go off, you start seeing the flashing caution light, and then the vault door begins to close. And immediately I thought of Little Pip. Whenever she opened that vault door, and she was ready to step outside into the wasteland, and the Overmare told her, basically, you leave, you can't come back. And Little Pip had a choice to make between staying and spending the rest of her life inside of a stable, or going outside to save her friend. And the massive adventure, that awaited her, the legacy that she was about to create for herself, the Lightbringer, what she was about to become, and all that came flooding back to me as I stood there watching that door close. I reopened the door, and I thought immediately I could just see Little Pip standing there before that door. And it was at that point I said, I'm getting the other Fallout game. I made my mind up. I was going to get the other Fallout game. So I went to GameStop, and this is the embarrassing part. I went to GameStop and asked them, did they have the first Fallout for PS3? The guy looked at me and he said Fallout 1 never was available on PS3. And immediately I began racking my brain thinking, then what the heck was that cousin of mine playing? And I said, Fallout 2? He said, no, PC only. I said, okay, what was the next one came after that? What was the other one that came out on PS3? He said, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. I said, well, I have New Vegas, so Fallout 3 then. So I got Fallout 3. And again, they had the collector's edition, or the ultimate edition, which had all of the DLC. So I got that, brought it home, started the game, and then created my character. And then I remembered, whenever I started the game, I remembered from watching a cousin play. I remembered everything up to whenever I remembered everything up to the goat test. After that, everything was new to me. And I remember I did the goat test and finished playing, got to the segment where you're about to leave the vault. And immediately I felt like Little Pip. I did. I felt so much like Little Pip about to leave the vault. About to leave the stable for the first time. And I remember that girl, I forgot her name, in the vault. The girl that basically bans you from the vault, from Vault 101 later. I remember I had to go out and find my dad. And I remember getting to the door, and the security was nearby. They were coming after me. And I remember thinking to myself, I felt like Little Pip. And I remember I stepped outside the vault. And as soon as I stepped outside the vault, I found myself in this corridor. This rocky corridor. And I remember looking around, and I think there was a couple of skeletons outside. And I remember turning back and looking at the vault door. And I remember I turned and I started down this corridor, and I got to that wooden door that led outside of Vault 101. And I remember I got to that door, and I just took a deep breath, because I said, it's about to begin. And I remember as soon as I opened the door, the screen goes like white. And then, like, your vision begins to clear as you see the DC wasteland. You see the Commonwealth ahead of you, just beyond you. And I remember I stood there, and I just slowly looked around. I slowly moved the analog stick, and I just slowly looked around at everything. And then I remember I smiled, and I remember doing this. I smiled and said, now to find Velvet Remedy. I didn't say now to find my dad. I smiled and I said, now to find Velvet Remedy. And I walked down that path to the main road, and I remember I'm still looking in the direction of that little town there, and in the direction of the school. And I remember I'm looking to my left as I'm moving. I remember I'm looking to my left as I'm walking, and suddenly my rads begins, like, suddenly go. My Geiger counter immediately begins going off, and I see one rads per second. And I immediately look down as I step back and realize I've been standing in an irradiated puddle. And I immediately thought about that other Fallout Equestria SFM animation. I can't remember the animator, but it was an animation where Little Pip stepped outside the vault, stepped outside the stable, and immediately her Geiger counter was like going off, and she made a mention about already getting irradiated. And I remember thinking about that, and I thought, I'm doing exactly like Little Pip. I haven't been outside the vault 5 minutes, and already I'm contaminated. And I remember thinking, I need to find Velvet. And so I just started exploring. And I remember in both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, I wanted to get the Scoped 44 Magnum. The Scope 44 Magnum is one of the really good guns in Fallout 3. In New Vegas, you can get the 44 Magnum, but you have to put a scope on it. And so I remember I acquired the Magnum first. because that was Little Pip's signature weapon, the 44 Magnum, Little Macintosh. And I remember I wanted the Scope 44 Magnum so that I could really feel like Little Pip. So I found a few Scope 44 Magnums and managed to repair them, and kept one in my inventory to use from time to time. And I started hoarding up bullets like crazy. And whenever I got the 44 Magnum in New Vegas, I started checking the vendors, the gun runners and such, and to check for the scope for it. Finally got that. And then I remember I also went with the combat armor, the security armor. I ended up in New Vegas. I kept the Vault 34 security armor, a couple suits of the Vault 34 security armor, so that I could pretend that I was Blackjack. So basically, in Fallout 3, I was pretending that I was Little Pip. And in New Vegas, I was pretending that I was Blackjack. Now, I know I know Project Horizons is set in Hoofington, but still, I pretended that for Fallout 3, Fallout Equestria, Fallout New Vegas. I pretended that was basically Blackjack. It kind of fit with casinos anyway. So, but I remember I went with the combat armor for in 3, and this Vault security armor in New Vegas, and so I basically pretended that I was Little Pip and Blackjack respectively. And anytime that I go to Tenpenny Tower, I don't call it Tenpenny Tower, I always call it Ten Pony Tower. And I always call it that. And then but pretty much whenever I talk about Fallout, about half the time I call it what it's actually called. Other times I use terms like that is based from Fallout Equestria, like Manhattan, Philadelphia, the Maripony Military Base, or the Ten Pony Tower. That's basically, I call them stables. That's basically what I do. But I remember whenever I got to Olney, whenever I got to Olney in Fallout 3, I immediately thought of Old Olney in Fallout Equestria. And I remember seeing a map that showed that Old Olney had been hit, or there had been a megaspell that had went off near it. And so, yeah, that was how I got involved. That was what I've done, and I'm still playing through Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. I've finished, I'd say, 98% of all the quests in the game, but it's still fun to explore. And same thing with Skyrim. But that was how I got involved with Fallout Equestria. Well, that's how I got involved with Fallout Equestria, and that's how I became. And now I'm a big Fallout nut. I absolutely love Fallout. It's such a great series. The soundtrack is amazing for Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and it kind of now, anytime I think about fall, I think about Fallout. I think about Fallout Equestria. So, again, I have to say to KCAT and to Somber, thank you both so much for writing such amazing stories. Thank you both so much for writing such amazing stories. Because of you guys, I became a Fallout Equestria nut and Fallout nut in general. And also to everybody else that has written a Fallout Equestria story, thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you all so much. And thank you to everybody that has ever made a Fallout Equestria piece of fan art or even fan music. Thank you. And thank you to everybody that is keeping that fandom alive too. And so yeah, I owe all of you guys for getting me involved with Fallout Equestria and Fallout in general. And so if it hadn't, honestly, if it hadn't have been for Fallout Equestria, I would not have started Fallout in general. I honestly can say that. Because of the lore, the characters, the world, the story, with FOE, it just pulled me in, and I wanted to experience what started it, what spawned those stories. And so I started playing the games, and now I'm addicted to them. I love those games. I love Skyrim. So yeah, but that is how I got involved with Fallout in general. That's how I became a Fallout fan. It all started with Fallout Equestria. So yeah, but I wanted to share my story with you guys, and so yeah, I want to share my story with you guys because I do think it's interesting myself. But again, happy October, happy Fallout October, and hopefully on the 23rd we don't have to worry about any nukes or mega spells falling from the sky. Who knows? I don't know. But again, thank you guys again for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys in the next video that I do. Take care.